Hi everyone, it's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri 1921 Diary Series. My dog, who's lying nearby, has been licking his paw. He's not at the moment, but if you hear that horrific slurping sound in the background, that's what it is. Hopefully you won't. Okay, so we are up to, is it part 3? I think it's part 3. I'll have to check that. It could be part 4 of the long diary entry of the 30th of, gosh, I'm so stressed out today because of the trip. The 30th of April, 1921, which is Saturday in Paris. And our recap for this part 2, just Dmitri had resolved not to let the gossip about his trip with Coco to upset him. He just, hopefully he was successful with that. He just decided that no matter what people said, he was going to keep smiling and not let it upset him. I'm sure he was worried about allowing himself to plunge into another state of depression. So yeah, he'd really resolved not to let that happen this time. And we find out that Maria is embarking on something of a new existence, an existence she had already had in London, but that she hadn't resumed when she'd moved to Paris, but would now be resuming. And by that, he doesn't mean working for Chanel, but doing the proper thing for a lady of royalty or the upper classes, and just plunging right into charity work. Okay, our cast today is just Maria, Dmitri, and Maria and Gulia's good friends, the Chrysovalonis, who'd been helping them and supporting them. Coco is not mentioned today, but this is just a single paragraph. So she will, of course, be mentioned more in this long entry. But yeah, for the moment, this is just about Maria, basically. So as I mentioned in the last video, my departure is imminent for first France and then Switzerland. And so this will be the last video before I leave. So by this week next time, I should be, well, no, I'll still be in Paris. Maybe I'll be doing a video, maybe not. But Crispin. Uh-oh. Let me see if I can distract him a little. Maybe that worked. Yeah, I'll still be in France, but I will be resuming shortly thereafter. And I am bringing this book with me, A Princess in Exile, the sequel to Maria's first volume of memoirs, The Education of a Princess. And as you can see, this is one of the books that one of my dogs over the years has gotten to. You can even see literally the teeth marks in it, but luckily it's still readable. So I will have it with me, and I'll be having the pleasure of rereading it at Schatzalp. And then I can give you, for those of you who haven't already read it, or who, like me, have forgotten many of the details, I can tell you what Maria's take on the whole Coco romance was. If I recall correctly, she claimed to have been the person who got it started, who introduced Dmitri to Chanel, and that certainly is not what we have seen in Dmitri's diaries, unless she introduced him to Chanel in 1914, when he was in Paris prior to the war, spending some time with his father and kind of doing an abbreviated version of the Grand Tour. But I don't think she was. I don't think she was in Paris at that time, and well, part of it she was, but I doubt she was the one who introduced him to Chanel in 1914. Anyway, here's a picture of Dmitri in her memoirs. Two different pictures, and the interesting thing about this one is that that's Chow Dog. Dmitri, the first dog he got, he was so terribly anxious to get a dog. He loved dogs. He always wanted to have one with him. And for some reason, he wanted a Chow, I think probably just because they were fashionable then. So he got Chow Dog, not a puppy, but an adult. And the problem with Chow Dog turned out to be that any chance he got, he would make a run for it. And that doesn't mean he was unhappy with Dmitri or with his living situations. My little dog that you have heard barking, he'll do that too if he gets a chance. He'll just run and he'll be gone for a few hours and then he'll come back if we aren't able to find him. But as you can see, Dmitri's got his walking stick pressed against Chow Dog here, and Chow Dog looks like, yeah, he's not going to just stand still there. So Dmitri is applying a little pressure to keep him there just for the duration of having the photo taken. And another interesting thing is, as you can see, Dmitri is not in a Russian uniform. He's in a British officer's uniform. He was actually a captain in the British Army. And yeah, and there's the polo photo. So I'm really looking forward to being able to share some of what I discover about Dmitri and Coco, and about what Maria thinks of Dmitri's political endeavors when I'm at Schatzalp and we can dive back into this. Okay, now before I go to the actual reading of the diary entry, I should say that there's a section in it which you'll recognize that just doesn't seem to make much sense to me, but we'll talk about that. He didn't write it in English, but it's just that I'm not sure what he means. So, okay, here we go. When I arrived, Maria was in a state of utmost excitement because she had organized a bazaar for Russian ladies, the proceeds of which would not go into the common fund, which is usually a very incomprehensible beginning for a charity, but directly to each individual lady. The bazaar took place at the Crisovolonis' house, 72 Rue de Varennes. The hosts were extremely kind and generous about this and offered their home free of charge, of course. As regards the political situation, very little happened during the period when I wasn't writing. Well, and it's also the case that I haven't been in touch with people who are receiving information from Russia. Okay, so he arrived back on the 15th or 16th of April. This is being written on the 30th. So that's, he's gone 2 weeks without really finding out what's going on in Russia. That's unusual for him. And he says he hasn't been in touch with the people who are receiving information from Russia. So some of those people, of course, would be the members of his own little intelligence gathering group. And it seems to me that that is simply now defunct after what happened in Berlin. He's just not sticking his neck out with things like that anymore. Okay, so the part that I don't understand, of course, is this about how charities are organized. The proceeds of this bazaar are not going to go into a common fund that will then be used for charitable purposes. And okay, that's understandable enough. What I don't understand is when he says, which is usually a very incomprehensible beginning for a charity. So does he mean chaotic? Does he mean that, that Maria was afraid it would be too chaotic to have everything going into a common fund? I don't know. That doesn't make sense. Isn't that sort of the point if you start a charity? And instead, each individual lady who's setting up a booth for the bazaar is going to take the proceeds into her own hands and then maybe decide what to give to the charity or disperse it to needy people she knows. I just don't understand that, but it is what it is. So the Crisavalloni's house, the address he gives, 72 Rue de Varenne. It's Varenne. As far as I know, Gulia and Maria had been living in an apartment at the Crisavalloni's house. The Crisavalloni's were, of course, wealthy Romanians, a banking family, and the Rue de Varenne, the house there, had indeed been divided into apartments. I looked it up. So there's a main house, and then there are two wings that form a kind of U. The wings don't stick straight out. They are at right angles to the main house, and they had flats in them. And then there was a nice garden courtyard. But it has its own Wikipedia entry, but I can't find the name of the Crisavalloni's amongst the owners. It seems like it's a pretty well and specifically drawn up list of owners. So yeah, that's another thing I'm confused about. But it now, I believe, at some point it became the property of the state, and now I think is occupied it's got offices for the Ministry of Education in France. It looks pretty much exactly the same as it looked back in the older photos, the pre-World War photos, and when Maria and Gulia would have been living there. But yeah, I guess, what can you say? The Wikipedia article does not cite every single year, so maybe the Crisavalloni's owned it for a brief time and then sold it. Okay, so this phrase he uses, while I wasn't writing. Well, we know that he writes frequently, almost every day, but, he means he's not doing his long diary entry, I think. And so he wasn't including things that were happening on or I've got it backwards. He wasn't writing his day-to-day diary entries, and that's why he hasn't covered the things that happened during the period when I wasn't writing. So next time we are into the whole situation in England. It's made up of several long paragraphs, but I think we can fit them all into a single video. So that's the video we'll be starting with when I'm either when I'm in France or when I'm settled in at Chatzalp. And it's a good one, an important one, a good section of the diaries. And it's not just that Dmitri is reacting to it as, oh, here's some interesting news. He really feels like he has a personal stake in it for various reasons. So, it's good to watch. You'll be learning more about him and not just information about what was going on in England and how people viewed it. Okay, and before I say goodbye for a week, I also wanted to say that one of the things I'm going to be doing while I'm at Chatzalp or in Davos, I'm going to make one or more day trips to St. Moritz. So Dmitri and Audrey spent time in St. Moritz in the late 20s, and, well, I don't know the exact years. So that's one of the things that I'm going to go and check. I'll be able to look at the guest list there for the Palace Hotel, which is where they stayed, and hopefully nail down the actual, they would go, so it was part of the pre-jet set places that people would go. In the winter, you had high season in St. Moritz, and that's where, everybody who was anybody was in St. Moritz, and so they would go there. And Dmitri was very, very keen on bobsledding, and he participated in bobsledding. I don't know if he did competitive bobsledding or not. Certainly he was never professional, but there were lots of, also amateur competitions that he could have been in. And I have a distinct memory of seeing a picture of him, a couple of pictures of him on bobsleds, but I can't for the life of me, I've looked in all the books I have, and I can't for the life of me remember where I saw those. And one of his stepsisters was there with him as well. And so, I want to go to the Winter Sport Museum in Davos, and also because Davos had a world-class bobsled run. And so it'd be interesting to know if he was in Davos prior to his stay at Chateau, and if he did, bobsledding in St. Moritz. Davos no longer has its bobsled run, but St. Moritz still has a world-class one, as far as I know. So yeah, we will hopefully learn some new information about that. I hate to set this aside for a week because I enjoy it so much. And thank you for coming along for the ride, and I hope you won't be put off now by the lapse, but will come back in approximately a week's time and resume this journey with me. All right, bye.